These are a few of my 5-gallon container buckets that I've made. As you can see, there's different type of trellises coming out of them, or poles that you can tie the plants to. On the left two are 3/4 inch PVC inserted. Those aren't glued at the top. They can be disassembled and arranged in different ways, but it's something you can tie off to from one pole. In this case, I've got 4 poles in there. I'm just trying some things this summer, and these are inserted while the plants are still really small to avoid messing up the roots. The other two have the tomato type cages on them. The first one here is the larger tomato cage that's inserted through the 3/4 inch holes in the bucket, and then the next one down is actually the little smaller cage. These are all peppers. They're green hybrid bell peppers, and they've been planted for a week or so. They're just starting to come up, little babies. Okay, this is the main components. I'm in the garage now and getting ready to build a little batch of these buckets, and I'll go into a little more detail on each piece. But overall, you got a couple buckets there and a lid. But the tools that you're going to need to build this with are laying here. You'll need some scissors to cut your fabric with. There's a PVC cutting tool there, or you could use a hacksaw. A couple of blade bits. That's these little, basically wooden bits here. I've got an 1¼ inch blade bit and a 1 inch blade bit and a 3/16 drill bit. And I have a 4 inch hole saw. If you haven't used a hole saw, it has a little arbor in it there that indexes the saw. Where it centers it up, you can see the drill bit down through the middle, and that will help you drill a nice round hole. You could use a jigsaw or possibly even a utility knife if you wanted to cut round holes. This particular blade happens to fit the center pot that I'm going to use. This is going to be my wick pot, and it happens to be a 4 inch on the inside, so that this will fit down through my top bucket into the bottom bucket. This is just a little template that I made that's 6 inch center to center, and just the little bitty holes on the corners will help me mark the top of the lid when I put the lid. That's the 4 on the corners there that I marked. It just keeps them spaced evenly. And on the other shot, I showed the PVC pipes being inserted through here, or you could put a piece of bamboo, or you could put a wire cage through there. So you might wait to drill those holes to see what size you actually need. The finished bucket is going to be something like this. It's going to be 2 buckets stacked together, and as you put the top bucket on top of the bottom bucket, it raises it up a couple inches, creating a gap in the bottom that you are going to use in this case to put your water. These are 2 just regular buckets that are stacked. They do say use food quality buckets. These are just 2 that's stacked just for an example. Now, I've got a couple laid out here that I'm going to use for one of the ones on my project. This is the lid itself, and it's cut with the 4 inch hole saw that I mentioned, and that just creates an opening for the plant to come through. I started with a little smaller hole than that, and decided it'd be better to have a little larger hole in case I had a couple plants or something like that in there. But you could use any size hole there that the plant will actually come through. The 4 marks on the outer I mentioned before for PVC or a wire cage. You could drill that. In this case, if I did drill it, I would drill it at 1 inch, which would PVC, 3/4 inch PVC would insert through that hole. And on the right is a 1 1/4 inch hole needed there. That's one of my 2 blade bits. My wood blade bits really drill through this plastic real easily. And what that'll do, that'll allow my watering tube to insert through that hole. And that watering tube is a 1 inch PVC pipe that I'll show you in just a second. Okay, on the side of this bucket that's going to be the bottom bucket, I will drill a hole, 3/16 hole, 2 5/8 from the bottom. That'll allow the water to spill out of the bottom of the bucket before it reaches the top bucket. You don't want the roots sitting in water, but it just needs to be just below the bottom of the top bucket so that it's not sitting in water. And when you water it, it'll allow that water to pop off there and not overfill. So this will be the top bucket. that I'm going to drill to set down inside of the other bucket. And to show you from the bottom what I'm going to do, I'm going to drill a 4-inch hole, which that will be for my little purple pot to sit down in. And this little purple pot, I'm going to drill 3/16 holes around it so that it can wick water up through it. And I'll show you that more in a little while. But it'll fit actually inside of this hole here. And these holes here, I tried to stay very common with my size, as you can tell. There's 3/16 holes all around, and what that'll do, that'll allow this to, if there is water that gets up in the system, it will allow it to drip back down into the bottom bucket from this top bucket here. So these are just holes that will relieve any water that might wick up in there, or if it rained and some of the water wanted to drip through into the bottom bucket, that would allow flow down there. But primarily, when these two buckets are together, this one will be flipped over, and this little purple bucket will be coming out the bottom. Once it's drilled, it'll be coming from inside the pot and sticking down through the pot. That water will actually wick up through this pot up into this 5-gallon bucket here, and that's still going to be the water source for the plant itself. Okay, I'm going to reshoot this just for a second, only because I added a mark here for the watering tube to go through. That's going to be where my 1¼ inch blade bit is going to go through there. And the reason why, this is a 1-inch PVC pipe by 24 inches long, and I got it marked at 2 inches here, and that's going to be the approximate level of the water that's in the bottom of the second bucket. And I'm going to drill a few holes here in this so that when I fill this tube with water, it will allow the water to come out and fill up the reservoir in the bottom of the two buckets. So basically this is going to insert from the top and come all the way through the lid, and then come all the way through the bucket here and into the bottom bucket, and that's going to be the water source for getting the water to the bottom of the second bucket. I switched out for the 1¼ inch blade bit, which will be a big enough hole for the 1-inch PVC pipe to go in. I'll go ahead and drill that out real quick. Goes right through. Okay, I'm going to attempt to one-hand this 4-inch hole saw in this bucket. We'll see how this goes. You may need a power drill with electrical cord. This one's a battery-operated one. We'll just see how it goes here. You got a good battery. It shouldn't take too much to drill through this plastic. There we go. There's a 4-inch hole, and I'll remove the little plug out of my saw there, and I'll be ready for the next hole. Okay, same kind of deal with the lid. I'm going to use the 4-inch hole saw, so I'll just index it fairly close, and I set my clutch a little tighter where it wouldn't skip like it did last time. See if I can hold it here. There we go. Got it out of there. It goes right through. And I'll go ahead and cut my blade bit. This is the top hole in the lid that will allow the watering tube to go through. It's 1¼ inch, just like we did in the bottom of the bucket over here. So because it's the same tube going through both holes. And there we go. And we'll do a little test fit here with the 1¼ inch. I'll file that out just a little bit. It's a little snug like that, but I'll file it out with a rat tail file and open that hole up. It's a little hard to do one hand, but I'll file this out. File this hole out a little bit with a file, and as you can see, the watering pipe now goes through the top of the lid. And I'll do the same thing where it'll actually go through this hole in the bottom for the bottom bucket, for the top bucket as well. Okay, as you can see, this is the 1-inch by 24-inch watering pipe, and this is going to be the water source as far as getting water to the bottom bucket. As you can tell, I've drilled the holes now 2 inches from the bottom or so, just under 2 inches, and I used a 3/8 inch drill bit and just put some multiple holes in there just so that when you water, the water can go from inside the pipe to the bottom of the bottom bucket. Okay, here, since I only have one hand, I'm not going to drill this while I'm filming, but I'm just giving you an example of what I'm doing with the bottom of this watering tube. And I went with a little bigger drill bit, like a 3/8, and basically what I'm trying to do is just make a big enough hole that the water, when I water through the top of this 1-inch pipe, will come out the bottom of the bucket, and it can come out several different ways. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but if you notice, I'm drilling through both sides of the pipe at one time. If you just have a hand drill, basically you just want to put some holes around so that when you water, the tube won't just fill up and try to back up on you. You want the water to be able to disperse, and I would say mainly you want holes around the top part of it, kind of where I'm drilling now. You want several holes so that if there's water already in the bottom, it won't tend to back up. Drill these 3/16 holes out in the bottom of the bucket and the side one here. You can tell these drill out real easy. I went ahead and drilled all the bottom ones in the bottom of the top bucket as well, 3/16 inch. That's just about it now. But just to show you, there's two buckets stacked together there. There's a watering tube and a hole, and the hole here is where your plant's going to come through. This is going to be where you add your water. And just to show you, if I take the lid off and you look down in the bucket, there's my little purple pot. That's my wick bucket down in the bottom. And I still need to drill it out, but I'll drill holes in it, and there's some holes that are already in the bottom as well, but I'll drill this out. I'll clean up everything and get all the little spaghetti pieces out of there from drilling, but you can see where I drilled. Now I'm looking down into the bucket. You can see the holes that I drilled in there. But if you were to look and pull this apart, put this pot back in where it goes, what you will see, if you was to remove this top bucket, what you would see, there's your wick bucket and there's your watering tube. So as you water into the watering tube, the water is going to go into your bottom bucket, which is basically a bucket with a little bitty hole drilled in it. And that hole that I showed you is this drilled there, will allow the water to spill out before it reaches the top of this second bucket, because you don't want your roots sitting in water. So when we put all this back together, put the watering tube in. Before I put this center wick bucket in, I'll put a little bit of cloth in here, as you can see, and I'll just spread it around. I'll spread it around and set this little pot down in the middle here, so that when I do put my soil in, it'll keep any soil from going into the little small holes down in here. And it's just something that I added just because I wanted to. And it is open at the bottom though, because I got a hole actually cut in that fabric. But when you pack your soil, you want to be sure to pack it real good down into the center wick bucket. So the way this is supposed to work, I'm trying it this year myself just to see how it works, but it's supposed to, you add the water to the pipe, and the water goes to the bottom of the bottom bucket, and it wicks back up through this bucket, comes back up. Now there's some other instructions on tomatoes versus pepper plants with lime and things like that. But basically, if you're doing tomatoes, you put lime down in your soil, and there's a certain kind of lime, so look that up and for more instructions. But then you take your 10-10-10 or 6-6-6 and put it in the top, just say 3 or 4 inches of this soil, put a little bit around and fill it up with soil, and your plants coming out, like your pictures I showed you before, they're real close to the top of this lid when the plants come up and come out of there. So we'll see this summer how they do, but mine, I actually filled them up. It's pretty much very full with soil here, so that other things can't blow down in here as easy, and even rainwater maybe can't get in there as easy. And then the plant's just going to come out of here, and depending on your plant, is if you need some way to stabilize them, again, you can use tomato baskets or PVC pipe or even bamboo if you wanted to. I would just suggest, depending on your plant, go ahead and insert your system, what you're going to do to carry the plant with before the plant gets very big, so you don't mess up the roots by sticking something down in that hole. Again, I pre-cut some 3/4 inch PVC pipes that I use, but some of them I'm trying tomato baskets on. I'm just going to try to see what works the best. But that's basically the little bit of time I've had mine going. I've only had to water them. It seems like they only want water every couple or 3 days, so they seem to be pretty water friendly so far, but my plants are just tiny so far. And voila, this is your 5-gallon bucket self-contained growing watering system. It will not water itself. You have to water it through the little tube that's there. But the benefits I see of it is that the soil is very well protected on the bottom. I've heard people growing tomatoes in even straight out of the bag of black cow. In this case, I'm cutting my soil down with a little peat because it is a wicking situation. So I'm putting about 25% peat in mine to help it wick up a little easier, and maybe a handful or two of perlite just to loosen that soil up a little bit. That's just what I'm doing, and I'll try it this year and see how they work. But this would have very little intrusion from the bottom, or you could set this on your patio or driveway, things like that. It's very, very contained. The only mess it's going to make is when you water it on the side. The little hole that's in there is going to tend to leak a little water out when you fill it up. That's how you tell it's full. You'll see it perk out of that hole. So very little intrusion from the bottom, from any other bugs or that type of thing. Also, the top is fairly well covered so that there's very little intrusion from the top. From what I've read so far, they're saying that the soil can be used for 5 or 6 years if you just freshen it up each year. And so in this case with its 2 buckets, if you had to, you could pull this thing apart and pull the whole top bucket out if you needed to clean your bottom water or your bucket to maintenance it each year. Looks like it'd be fairly easy to maintenance. But basically the lid will just snap down on there the way it did fit. These particular buckets are pickle buckets from Firehouse Subs, and you know, they're food quality buckets. It does take a little while for the odor to get out of them, but they're pretty neat looking buckets, and I like supporting our firefighters. So I hope you enjoy them. Thanks for taking a look at the video.